Welcome back. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to handle the errors with examples. If you're coming to Go from other languages, you may be surprised that Go doesn't have throw-catch statements or exceptions in the usual sense. As I showed you in the last lecture, we Gophers use a simple if statement to check for the errors explicitly. It's because it's more readable and bugs cannot hide under the buggy code or inside a throw-catch statement. Let's check it out now. In Go, some functions always work without any errors. For example, let's take a look at the i2a function from the strcount package. You've seen it before. It just takes an int value as an argument and converts it to a string value, then returns it. Okay? This function always succeeds and it never fails. It's because an integer can always be converted to a string value, no matter what. There is no need to return an error from this function. So since this function never returns error values, so you don't need to handle any errors when you call it. Okay, now let's take a look at an example code to understand this better. Let me call strcount.i2a by passing it an integer value like this, 42. Okay, I'm gonna save the result of this function into the s variable, which is a string, since i2a function returns a string. Let's take a look at the documentation of this function again to better understand how it works. As I showed you before, it takes an int value as an argument and returns a string value back. Okay, it's that simple. Alright, let's print the result now. Okay, let me run it as well. As you can see, it just prints 42 as a string. Nothing interesting here so far. But now you've seen that you don't need to handle any errors for this function, because it doesn't provide any error value for you to check. It always succeeds. Now let's take a look at another function which returns an error value. Here is another function from strcount package. A2i means ASCII to integer. You can think of ASCII as a string value. So it takes a string value and it tries to convert it into an int value. Pay attention to my words now. It tries. So it doesn't always succeed. As you can see here, that's why it also returns an error value. That error value tells us about whether the conversion from the string value to int value is successful or not. As I said, this function doesn't always return a successful result. It may fail. And when it does so, you should never use the returned int value from this function. It's because the returned value may be in an undefined state. It's probably gonna be a value which you didn't expect. But in the case of a2a function, it returns 0 as an error. So it doesn't matter actually whether you check the error or not. I'm just showing it to you here as an example for handling errors. It's just a simple example. Okay, now let's take a look at its error value. When it returns a nil error value, it means that the function is successful. So you can use the converted int value, okay? Otherwise, when it returns a non-nil error value, it means that the conversion has been failed and it couldn't convert the passed value to an integer. Let me show you this function in the coding editor as an example, so you can understand it better. Let's first call the a2a function like this. And let's pass it a command line argument. As you can see here, it returns an int value and an error value, right? So let's assign these values to variables. I'm gonna store the returned int value in the n variable. Then I'm gonna store the returned error value in the r variable. Okay? Alright, let me print the returned integer value as well. Println converted number. I'm gonna pass the n variable here. Okay. Then let's print the returned error value. Returned error. I'm gonna pass the error variable. As you can see, I can print the error value because in Go, errors are just values. Okay, this is important. If something is a value, then you can use it almost in everywhere because it's just a value. Okay, now let me run it. First, I'm going to pass the correct number, 42, like this. Notice that it has returned nil here. Remember, this is the returned error value. So now it's nil. So this means that the function has been successful. As you can see, it prints 42 here. So the conversion was successful. Remember, A to I function can only convert a string value, which contains a correct numeric value. So now I'm going to run it with a non-numeric value, so it will fail. Look at what it returns. It has returned 0 here, because it has failed. As I said, you should never use the returned values from a failing function. And it has returned an error value. As you can see, error values can print themselves. Here the error value prints itself like this. So in summary, when a function returns an error value, you should always handle it. And when there is an error, you should never use the rest of its result values, except the error value. Alright, that's all for now. Congrats, now you know what an error value is. In the next lecture, I'm going to show you how to handle the returned error values. See you there. Welcome. Do you remember the feet to meters conversion program from the previous lectures? Now your challenge is to add an error handling to that program. Let me show you what it's going to look like. Let me run it without a number like this. Hello. As you can see, it tells me that hello is not a number, right? So your challenge is simple as this. Just add an error handling to the program. So when it's not a number, it should display an error message like this one. That's it. Of course, it should continue to work with the numbers. Now I'm gonna pass the number, 100. As you can see, it converts it perfectly. Okay, this is your challenge. Good luck. Welcome back. I hope you solved the challenge. Now I'm going to show you my own solution. Let's get started. As you know, currently this program doesn't check for errors, right? So let's see what it prints when I pass an incorrect value to it. As you can see, it just prints 0 feet is 0 meters. Let's add an error handling to it now. Previously, I haven't used the error variable here. Let's bring it alive like this. Now I'm gonna check for the error using a simple if statement like this one. If error isn't equal to nil. Okay. You now know that if the returned error value from the function isn't nil, then it means there is an error. So let's print that error value like this. I'm gonna call printf, then I type error %q. I'm using %q here because the argument is a string and I want to print it inside double quotes. Then I type is not a number and a new line. Okay, now I'm gonna pass the argument. Alright, done. Now since there's an error, so the program can't go on anymore. So let's return from the main function so the program will exit by itself. Alright, let's try it now. First, I'm gonna pass it an incorrect argument. Hola. Okay, as you can see, it has printed the error message. It detects the error and acts according to now. Now let's try to convert feet to meter by passing a numeric value like this, just 100. Okay, it works. So that means in the conversion operation, there wasn't an error. By the way, this program actually accepts any kind of float value as an input. For example, let's pass this float value 10.95. As you can see, it still works. Now let's pass it another float value without zero values, like this. Just dot and 5. Here doesn't have a 0 at the beginning, right? This is a shorthand form of float values. I can type it like this. Okay, this one also works. Cool. Now, as the last example, let's pass the float value in the scientific notation like this. 1E3. This just means 1000. 3 here adds 3 zeros after the 1 here. It calculates it as well. Cool. And this also works. 1E6. Anyway, I played with it enough. Okay, that's all. So now you know how error handling works in Go. Well done. By the way, from now on, you'll see error handling everywhere. So if you think that you didn't understand it well enough, just keep continue the course and in time it will be perfectly clear for you. Okay, see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.